Hi, everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is a normal live stream, unlike last week. Last week we did a charity live stream, and I wanted to start out by just saying a massive thank you to anyone who was watching, taking part, particularly anyone who donated. We were trying to raise some money for Alzheimer's charities, which is an exceptionally worthwhile cause, and we raised, I'm delighted to say, over $2,100 just in one live stream, which is absolutely amazing, and I'm thrilled to bits. If you have not seen the live stream last week, if you are interested, then please do go and check it out. There's it's still open for donations, so the chance is still there. I should probably say first up, it is very hot here in the UK at the moment, and we don't have aircon much, so I am quite sweltering. So apologies if I get a slight sheen on my head. But we will get into this. What I normally try and do at the beginning of these live streams is just to let people know a few things that are going on out there in the world of sort of geeky TV shows and films coming up. As always, there's a few little bits of snippets of news. One is what is now quite an ongoing saga of what are the Game of Thrones spin-off shows going to be. I did a quick count, and I think we're up now to, just in the last year or so, 11 different potential spin-offs that we've heard about. These are all from reputable sources. I think we have to, with all of these things, take quite a big pinch of salt. What clearly seems to be happening is that HBO are just testing a few different ideas, just seeing what the reaction is out there in the world, as well as seeing when they're developing something, whether it just seems to work. So that's what's been going on. The latest thing is that apparently one of the spin-offs that we'd heard about before, one of the mooted shows, which was going to be called Flea Bottom, that is now not going to be going ahead. I'm a little bit disappointed about this. The idea behind this was that this was going to be something that George R. R. Martin had said that he was very keen on, which is to actually see the world not through the eyes of the elites, the 1%, the rich, the powerful, which is what we do in A Song of Ice and Fire pretty much all the way through, but to actually experience it through the daily lives of normal people, the small folk. And so this was what this was going to be. It was going to be set in Flea Bottom, which is a sort of the slums of King's Landing. We didn't get any more information. We never got any names attached to it, so perhaps it never really got very far in development. However, we have been told of 3 new possible spin-offs to replace that one. There are apparently 3 animated series in the early stages of production. We know very little about these, although one of them apparently is going to be set in Yi Ti. Now, Yi Ti, for those who don't know, Yi Ti is it's in Essos, right to the east of Essos, and it's basically sort of set in, if you imagine Imperial China, that's the kind of feel that George R. R. Martin went for with it. A really ancient culture with huge amounts of secrets and history, but we don't know huge amounts about it. In A Song of Ice and Fire itself, none of the main characters go there. Nobody's going to go there. We've not got any flashbacks or particular things that we have to reference to it. Just a few rumors and odds and ends, really. There is, in the world of Ice and Fire, there are a few pages devoted to its history and its culture, but that's about it. So although this is intriguing, and it will certainly be interesting if this does go ahead, it will certainly be interesting to see a different part of this world of Ice and Fire. It's very early days and we don't know huge amounts about it. And as I've said many times, the further away from the main story we get, the less we have to go on. So the more original this is going to be. So, for example, some of the other spin-offs we had, things like 10,000 Ships, the Nymeria Martell, her story. We have some bits of history there. We know some names. We know what happened, but not huge amounts. This is even less information than that. So it having huge amounts of scope to go wherever it wants could be both a good thing and a bad thing. We would just have to wait and see. So that's the first bit of news that's going on out there. The second, I would just draw your attention to the Dune trailer, which has now dropped. It's a proper epic trailer. It's like 3.5 minutes long, and it looks amazing. For those who don't know, we have got a Dune or 2 Dune movies coming out. This is part 1 of they've split the main Dune story down into 2, I believe. This is part 1, which is due to come out. They've pushed it back several times, but it's due to come out later this year. It looks amazing. If you want to try and find it, if you go to my Twitter, go have a look for In Deep Geek. I've retweeted it, so you can find it through there. People do ask me about this quite a few times, so I'll just sort of say I'm not planning on covering Dune. That's not because I don't like Dune. I love Dune. I think Dune is excellent. It's just I have to draw the line somewhere, and it's been quite a long time since I read the books, so I think I probably wouldn't do it justice. So I'm going to mark this one down along with things like The Mandalorian that I will just enjoy watching rather than make any videos about. But there are plenty of other channels out there. I know Quinn's Ideas are covering this, so do go, and there are plenty of other good channels to go and check this stuff out. Okay, just a very quick thank you to my moderators. I try and tell them as much as I possibly can quite how wonderful they are, because they are. You're doing a fantastic job, guys. We have a full mod army out there. I can see just in front of me now Agreed Weirwood, Sasa K, Kraken Tacos, Chris of Old Stones, Carl Karstark, Reflective Rambling. I've got lots of moderators these days, and you'll all do. I think I saw Andrew K earlier as well, all doing amazing. Thank you so much. Had a few super chats today. I should probably say, today we're going to look at war and peace in the world of Ice and Fire. Now, I'm going to interpret this quite broadly, maybe looking at specific wars, a few different more conceptual ideas about what George R. R. Martin might be trying to say with his approach to war and peace in this story. And as always, I'm framing this around questions I get from my patrons. I will try and pick up as much as I can in the chat as we go through. I did have a couple of super chats before we went live, so I'll quickly get to them first. Alhad Paresh Dakar saying, thanks for the great content. The modus operandi of the others, even in The Last Long Night, is more about stealth than all-out war. Is there any chance that there would be no big war, and then dragons would be useless in the story? Yeah, I've got a couple of questions about the others and battles coming up from my patrons. I think what I'll say here straight out, you're right that they, for a huge army, which is what it is becoming, they're not just charging forward without any thought of tactics at all. It is quite sneaky beaky. They're trying a little bit here, doing something clever over there. As I've been rereading my way through book 1, it's becoming increasingly apparent to me that they have a deliberate strategy of trying to eliminate the leadership of the Night's Watch. This, I'm pretty sure now, I know there are other theories out there, but I'm pretty sure this is what was happening in the prologue with Waymar Royce, who is clearly a member of the leadership team. Even if he is new, he was targeted and eliminated. Then they targeted Jeor Mormont. You'll remember that the White came and attacked him. Also, Jeremy Riker, he was attacked. He was the replacement to Benjen as First Ranger, effectively, and he was attacked. So they were very clearly targeting the leadership of the Night's Watch. Also, they seemed to be, and this they sort of showed this in the show as well, but they seem to be not just heading en masse southwards, but sort of picking off areas, driving everybody south, making sure that they weren't leaving any space behind them, where any pockets of humanity behind them. So it's a very slow but very deliberate tactical move south. So at the moment it's stealth, but soon they obviously will realize that people will notice. So once they get south of the wall, then I think all stealth will be thrown out of the window. Then we will have battles, because people will, obviously the North will try to oppose them. So yes, we are going to have battles. We are going to have a war. That doesn't mean that that's the solution. That doesn't mean that that's how it's all going to end. That doesn't mean that's how they're going to be defeated. But there definitely will be, despite the fact that at the moment they're just being quite slow and sneaky, there definitely will be some battles coming up. Josh McKeown saying, thanks for the content. A what-if question for you. What do you think Ned could or would have done if Jon was born with Valyrian features? Okay, it's an interesting question. And I think I saw a few people debating this in the chat, actually, before we went live. So this is when when Ned was at the Tower of Joy. Obviously, he comes up with this plan of, I'll just say this is my son, my bastard son. We don't know all the details of how that came about, but that clearly was the plan. That plan only worked because of the fact that Jon looks like a Stark. Now, he might not have looked like a Stark. He might have looked more like a Targaryen. What would Ned have done in that case? Well, this is, as with all what-if questions, it's the temptation is to go and say, well, that's not what happened, so let's not worry about it too much. But speculating that if you get this child who is born with purple eyes and silver hair, very Targaryen-y looking, what would Ned do? Well, I think he's got 3 options, broadly speaking. The first would be something completely different from what he did actually end up doing with Jon, which is hide him somewhere. Maybe take him with Howland Reed went back up to the neck. Nobody ever goes there. Maybe that would be a place to hide a baby. If your promise is to try and keep a baby safe, your first option is to be with that baby. Your second is to give it to somebody that you trust absolutely. And it was very clear that Ned trusted Howland Reed absolutely. So I think that's probably if you're after an answer, that's probably the answer. But the other 2 options are variations on what he ended up doing. The first is just take the baby and just not say nothing, go up north, not talk about it, not mention the colouring, and hope for the best. Ned doesn't seem to be a kind of hope for the best kind of guy. He seemed to go to great lengths to make sure that nobody could ever know what happened at the Tower of Joy, where the Tower of Joy was, refusing to take the bones of his bannermen back up to their houses, that kind of thing. This was huge. He went to incredible lengths. So that doesn't really appeal to me as an idea. Maybe he could do some kind of dyeing of the hair to sort of make the baby look less Valyrian. That I think then means that the child would grow up knowing that they aren't who Ned tells them that they are, because of if they're having to have their hair dyed all the time, which makes that a lot harder to keep going, in my view. But it does have a little tweak, and as I say, I saw a couple of people mention this in the chat. There is a little tweak here which would be quite interesting, which is that obviously there was speculation about who, if this was Ned's bastard child, who was the mother. Now, one of the names that was bandied around was Ashara Dane. It wasn't a Sharadane. Incidentally, if anyone wants, I've done videos on this, so I'm not going down the whether a Sharadane actually is Jon's mother route, but people could have made that connection quite easily with the eyes, because House Dane has purple eyes, and so people might think if this child was born with purple eyes and light hair, Ned Dane, who is the current Lord of House Dane, the heir of House Dane as a child, he has got purple eyes, fair hair. So that would not be a look that would necessarily, if people made the connection over to House Dane, arouse suspicion. So I think those are the three broad options. Ned could have done the same thing but dyed his hair and kept him, tried to pretend that he was not a Valyrian. He could have taken him up to Winterfell and just ignored all the speculation and allowed people to say that this was his child with Ashara Dane, or he could have given Jon to Howland Reed. Those for me are the three broad options. So there were other things that he could have done, but what he decided to do in the end clearly was the optimal choice. Tony Sled saying George R. R. Martin's resistance to idolizing war is refreshing. Those who do not fight cannot fathom mass industrialized death, so we romanticize it. Song of Ice and Fire does not. Yeah, this is a theme very, very clear. George R. R. Martin doesn't like his story to be viewed as analogous in any way, but it is very clear that war damages people, livelihoods, everything, and he wants people to see that. He doesn't want to gloss over it at all, and this is where a lot of the accusations of it's just too violent or it's just got too much grim stuff going on, it's because he wants us to see it. He doesn't want to just walk around and show the glory of war. He wants us to see quite what it's like being in a war, to the extent that when you get characters like Tyrion and we see a battle through Tyrion's perspective, it's not heroic from his perspective. He is trying to survive. That is what a lot of the people in war, certainly the wars in the Song of Ice and Fire, they're just trying to survive all the way through. So yeah, I agree. It is refreshing that there's a lot of other writers who don't show all of that, and as a result, war seems not that bad. George R. R. Martin wants to show us what it is. Alex Rockus, yes, talking again about Jon's hair, he could shave it like egg. Yes, he could. That's another option. Chaos Ballerina saying, it's my birthday. I'm in a good mood, have some money, and a shout out to the chat. Well, shout out to the chat, and Chaos, happy birthday to you. I hope you're having a fantastic name day. I hope you're being spoiled rotten and surrounded by all those you love. So have a great day. Hard Peter saying, no question, love your content, and I've watched you so much that your accent doesn't sound foreign anymore. It's not foreign. I would love a Dan cameo someday. Have a good time, Zane. Thank you very much. Dan, he is downstairs today with the heat. He's decided not to take himself upstairs. I've left the door open for him in case he does want to go upstairs. So it's possible today. But I do have a precarious setup here with all my equipment, which means I can't move it around to show you. But he is there, and he has been moving around a little bit. So maybe. Right, let's get into some questions from my patrons. First of all, Mara Lee. Hi there, Mara. Saying, hi, Robert. Please remind us of what War and Peace was like in Westeros prior to and leading up to Aegon's conquest. Yeah, so war has always been a feature of Westerosi life, and this is perhaps even more so than it was after Aegon's conquest. What the world was like back in the Age of Heroes was not just the 7 kingdoms we think of now, but hundreds, thousands of small petty kingdoms. And the moment you get hundreds or thousands of small jurisdictions, this hugely increases the potential for there to be conflicts in various places. And sure enough, just taking, say, the North as an example, what House Stark's story is not, as we sometimes imagine, them always being in charge of the North all the way back, being the Kings of Winter and nobody challenging them. They started off as a small petty kingdom based around Winterfell, and only over the course of millennia did they take on one other king and then another king and then another king, and slowly expanded out their area of control across all of what we now consider to be the North. And that sort of warfare just carried on all the time. There were almost certainly, all the way through the Age of Heroes, there were wars happening all the time. Even just before Aegon's conquest, you get the area around, although there were, yes, much larger kingdoms at the time, like 7 kingdoms, but there were almost non-stop wars happening around the area of what is now sort of the Western Stormlands, the Riverlands, the Dornish Marches. They've always had warfare going on there. So there was just this constant rolling set of battles happening all over the place. So when Aegon came in, he yes, there was this huge conquest and wars and battles there. And yes, there were some ongoing battles with Dorne and the like, but it stopped a lot of these smaller infighting from happening. Now, we'll get on in a moment to the wars during the Targaryen rule, because there were still wars, but it's fair to say that these were then, when they happened, they tended to be bigger rather than the small petty kingdoms against one another, because the system itself created a structure that made that harder. Alex the Rocas saying, I've always wondered why the Targaryens were the only family from Valyria to conquer Westeros when there were more powerful ones, and they clearly loved expanding their empire. Thank you for the great content. Well, thank you. Yeah, so the Valyrians didn't look that far west, is the short answer. They did like conquering, but they didn't like conquering and then staying in this new place they were in. It was an expansion of their area of control rather than actually going and colonizing a new place. So they, generally speaking, the Valyrians were happily settled down in Valyria, and they went off on little holidays to the Isle of Lys and things like that, and maybe put down an uprising here or there, but they didn't move out. So some of the smaller families, yes, they moved out and expanded. So the lower down the pecking order of Valyrian families, but the Dragon Riders tended to stick to Valyria as their home base. Now, why didn't they go any further west? That's probably one of the reasons. But also there were legends, rumors that the downfall of Valyria would be caused by Lannister gold. So there was this kind of superstition. We're not told a huge amounts of details about this, but clearly there was this kind of, whether it's a superstition or whether it's prophecies, people not wanting to go to Westeros lest they bring about some great doom. Ironically, it came anyway. So the Targaryens were the only one of the dragon riding families to leave, that we've heard of anyway, to leave Valyria and head over to as far away from Valyria as they could within the Valyrian freehold area of control, and that was Dragonstone. Effectively, it had been recently taken by the Valyrians as a sort of an outpost to help guard their trade routes up and down the narrow sea. So that's why is that none of the other Valyrians had really wanted to, and it was only when Valyria was gone and the Targaryens were there. I mean, they hung around for 100 years before finally deciding that they wanted to invade Westeros. So there was never this feeling of, oh, we must go and invade Westeros. In fact, with the Valyrians, there wasn't a great colonial push. There was just a push for increased influence, which sounds like a technical difference, but I think it's quite an important one in terms of where they put their time and energy. Patrick, thank you, saying good time zone, Robert. Jalabar Joe petitions the Iron Throne to help retake the Summer Isles, and King Robert supposedly liked the idea. Is there a history of Westerosi expeditions abroad? Not hugely. So during the old history, sort of pre-Targaryen, then mostly the different houses just kept to their own areas. There was a long-standing interest in what happened with the Stepstones for obvious reasons, because that was guarding the Narrow Sea. Also, it's right by dawn, so there was a lot of interest there. There were occasional trips out to Valyria, but that was more to gain knowledge than anything else. I think while the Valyrian freehold was there, it would be a bit of folly to be going to try and take them on, so I don't think anyone really bothered. After that, then mostly no is the short answer. If you go through Fire and Blood, you see diplomatic relationships between Westeros and mostly the free cities, but no real thought about going beyond that. There are a couple I should probably say going west as well. You get Brandon the Shipwright, one of the Starks built ships, headed west, didn't come back. The Iron Islands sort of headed west as well. That's where they found the furthest of the Iron Islands, off to the Lonely Light, as far west as you go. So there are people who do make these trips, but as a sort of a Westerosi invasion, not really much of a history. James Bremner, first live stream. Oh, welcome. So first chance to chip in to say thanks for the wonderful content. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And question from Tony Sled. Stannis has not lost a defensive battle. He seems to know what will break enemies, gives troops huge victories that build legacies. Robert/Ned, thoughts? I'm not entirely sure what in terms of the question there, but in my thoughts on Stannis as a leader, sort of a battle commander, he seems competent, and if unadventurous, it has to be said, which is kind of suits his personality really. His history is that he was there, he defended Storm's End from siege, but basically that was just sitting there. Then he oversaw the attack on Dragonstone, which succeeded, but was too late. This is where the kind of the big rift with Robert Baratheon, his brother, came, is that the Targaryens, Viserys and Dany, escaped. Then obviously we have the war that he's involved in at the moment. So up north of the Wall, catching the wildlings by surprise, winning that battle, and then working his way across around to the north. He seems competent and good, but there's not much by way of sort of inspirational tactics or trying to catch people unawares, other than the catching the wildlings unawares north of the Wall. That seemed to be he could have come to the south of the Wall and just sort of helped in the defense, but coming out north of the Wall was a slightly different move. So yeah, I think he seems good. He seems competent, but not exceptional by any stretch of the imagination. Cloaked One. This is for Johan Sidoni. So thank you, Cloaked One. I love it when people do this, pick up questions from others in the chat. I can't always spot the chat moves quite quickly. Can't always pick up all the questions, and if people attach them to super chats, I definitely see them. So thank you. Saying hi, Robert. Zakalok here. Oh, hi there. First time live stream. So happy to be here. Great to have you. I just read again the first chapter of Game of Thrones. What do you think the others' swords are made of? Oh, interesting. Well, I'm tempted. I've got the book open and Kindle in front of me. I'm tempted to go to it and actually read the description. They are made from ice magic technology, is the short answer. We don't have much more than that. They seem to glisten and glow. They shatter normal swords, which seems to imply the shattering seems to imply not just it's really a hard sword, it's the cold that seems to do that. So my best understanding of the property, magical or whatever it is that it is so cold that when it comes into contact with other things, then they can shatter because of the cold, particularly something like steel. So George R. R. Martin has told us that they have their own ways of crafting, their own technologies which are different. He has said quite clearly that they are they're not undead, they are another kind of life, another type of life, which means that they operate on a slightly different way of being to how we would understand humans to operate. So the best I can come up with is ice magic technology, which they clearly forge it, but it's kind of, as I see it, the anti-Valyrian steel. That's what it is. We don't have any more detail than that, unfortunately. Question from Cloaked One again, this time for Ebenezer Goma. Thank you very much. Saying, thoughts on Gregor Clegane and the Bloody Mummers. George uses them to show us the savagery associated with war. They are the clearly evil characters in a world of grey. Yeah, they are. So the Bloody Mummers wreak havoc across the Riverlands and just pillage their way through the villages and farmsteads and things like that. Gregor Clegane, the same. He does it. This is the opening salvos of the war. Is when he goes out on orders from Tywin Lannister, burning his way through the Riverlands. Now this is I don't know whether you're wanting this level of detail, but this is really interesting kind of bit of nuance that we didn't really get, I think, on the show. But what was happening was Tywin, and this is where Tywin's strategic thinking seems to be well above people like Stannis, in my view, was that he was trying to achieve two things. First of all, he was trying to make the Tully army be spread out more than it was. It was all gathering in up in Riverrun, and that was threatening the Westerlands because they could perhaps go across and attack the Westerlands. But if he kept this running guerrilla warfare going on in the south of the Riverlands, then they had to bolster the defense of that, because he couldn't just abandon all of the villages in the south of the Riverlands. So that was the first thing. The second was that this was planned before Jaime attacked Ned in King's Landing. And this is crucial in terms of timing, because actually what Tywin was wanting to do was he was wanting to get Ned to lead the group to try and hunt down the mountain. Eventually, Ned he then says, "I would like to, but I can't because I've got a broken leg." And he then chooses Beric Dondarrion to go out. So the plan from Tywin was to tempt Ned out, and then there was the ambush in which Beric died for the first time. That would have been Ned. So Tywin's plan was not just to break apart the Riverlands, the Tully army, but also to kill Ned in an attack that, yes, it was by the Lannisters, but it was deniable as well. So that was, he was trying to achieve a couple of different things at that point. Jaime getting angry with the arrest of or kidnapping of Tyrion, taking it out on Ned. This scuppered his own father's plans. Jaime was not Melbourne there. But that wasn't, I think you're talking about them using them, George R. Martin using them to show the savagery associated with war. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, there was a bit of digression from me. But the George R. Martin definitely uses characters like, and the Bloody Mamas in particular, and the Mountain, they are used to show that there are some people within warfare who just use it as the opportunity to do whatever they want. And when you are as physically imposing as the Mountain, that is, well, that means that he can do pretty much as he wants, particularly as he's got his liege lord's backing to do whatever he wants. Chaos Ballerina saying, just opened my Tetley's. It's pretty great. Great, a fine cup of tea. Okay. Let's go to question from Lurk Perquin. I'm sure I've completely mispronounced that. Apologies. I will try and get better on that one. Saying, hi, Robert. This is my first ever question after being a patron for more than a year now. Well, I'm delighted that you're using your patron benefits. First, I'd like to thank you for your great work. You've inspired me to read the books after watching the show, because your videos and live streams made it clear to me that the books were even better. They certainly did not disappoint. Well, I'm delighted by that. I love it when if what I can do can inspire people to read great fiction, then I am going to be very happy man indeed. In what way, you ask, did the structure of power in Westeros influence the amount of wars being fought in known history? And with structure, I mean there being king, the hand of the king, lords, overlords, and being counselled by Maesters. I imagine that being a minor lord can be frustrating because you're basically a tool for the greater lords. On the other hand, the structure ensures that every piece of land is divided up and belongs to a lord whose loyalties are clear. So what do you think? And a related question, what influence did the Maesters have on the amount of wars? Well, I'll tackle the Maesters in just a moment. The structure is really, it's an interesting one, because what I was saying earlier, and this kind of flows from what I was saying about the shift from there being lots of petty kingdoms to there being one overarching system and ruler. And what that meant was that there was a shift from lots of ongoing small wars happening to not so much of that. But if there was a war, it would be quite big and impressive. The biggest, so the presence or not of dragons was the biggest shift in all of this. Because when the person at the top, what they created effectively was a kind of a feudal pyramid. Now, so you have your king, then you have your lords paramount, and underneath you have the vassal lords and so on down. And if the person at the top is strong and powerful, as with any petty dictator, then yes, this means that there's going to be less opposition. There's going to be fewer wars. And we see that when we have periods like, say, Jaehaerys I. There wasn't so much by way of wars. And a lot of that early period when you have strong rulers, then you don't get many wars. What happened after the dragons went is that you get this whole long succession of smaller wars, increasingly as people see that the system itself is not untoppleable, and that's when they start having. There were 5 Blackfire rebellions in the end, I think, and added to which the Greyjoys were trying to rebel. So that's what kind of happens. It's a matter of where the power is. And George R. Martin's kind of shining a light on that a little bit, I think. I don't think he's saying this is a good thing. I think he's just saying this is how this works. One thing, though, that you do say is about it might get frustrating is that there is very little scope for advancement within this system. If you're going to advance, then it's through marriage, linking yourself to other powerful families, but you're not going to take a notch up unless you're willing to risk all-out civil war. So the Boltons were itching to knock the Starks off of the top spot in the north, but they couldn't because of the way that the system was structured. When there was already a war and opportunity presented itself, that's the point at which they could. And so what that meant was that you often did get weaker people, weaker families, weaker houses at the top, and then underneath stronger families who were being prevented from progressing up the triangle, if you like, because of the way that the structure was set. And that leads to things like the Rain Rebellion, the Rain Tarbeck Rebellion in the Westerlands, the one that led to the reigns of Castamere, because at the time the Lannisters were weak and their biggest bannermen, supposedly loyal lords just beneath them, were that they weren't rebelling, but they were trying to push their way up the tree, but they could not. So that's what you happen. And the same actually incidentally happens a lot in the Riverlands. House Tully they're not the Lords Paramount of the Riverlands because they are the oldest or the strongest or the most respected of the families within the Riverlands. Far from it. It's because they just happen to be the first to support Aegon the Conqueror. And it was that loyalty that meant that Aegon rewarded them with that new title. And that meant that they had a whole load of people where the Freys, who were richer than them, and the Blackwoods and the Brackens and lots of other families in the Riverlands probably felt that they deserved it more. So yes, it created tensions. You also asked about the Maesters. The Maesters, generally, it was in their best interests to have peace and stability. But they wanted to prevent systemic change. So the Maesters' interests were advanced by them having the monopoly on power, and them being in a position of authority across the kingdom, and being of unimpeachable repute. So if anyone thought that the Maesters had an agenda, if they thought that they were on someone's side, then that would undermine the trust in the Maesters everywhere. So generally speaking, the Maesters, you ask, did they make there be more wars or fewer wars? You'll find that the Maesters do not advise for wars. They tend to advise for caution, and they tend to be quite ineffective diplomats when being asked to, if you go through things like Fire and Blood. Fletcher Reed, thank you very much, saying, do you feel Septon Meribald's epic anti-war speech in Feast for Crows is George writing from the heart? Love your content. Thank you very much. Yes, for those who haven't come across it, Septon Meribald gives it is an epic speech, and it's the speech where the broken men thing comes in, and he describes what war is actually like and how it affects people, and it's incredibly moving. It's incredibly well written. Is it George speaking from the heart? Quite possibly. He is. We say this a lot. He is a pacifist. He does not believe. He writes a lot about war for someone who doesn't believe in war. He thinks war is a bad thing. So yes, he may be. I think he's a good enough writer that he doesn't just create a character in order to say a thing that he wants to say in the middle of this created world. So I don't think it's quite that clear or delineated, but I think that he certainly feels those things, and this was an outlet for him to say some of them. Adrian Birchall saying a Cora question: why is fantasy pro-monarchy or monarchies? It's a very fair question. I think not all fantasy is pro-monarchies, but the great preponderance of it is. And the reason I suspect is because fantasy has been under the influence of Tolkien right, ever since The Lord of the Rings. And when I say that, I can't think of another genre that has been so shaped by one writer's vision. I suspect Tolkien wouldn't have actually liked the idea that his work has shaped all these other works within it. And I mean that not just in that there are some stories you can read which just look as if they wanted to write another Lord of the Rings, but the feel that of most of what we have as this kind of epic fantasy is based on medieval Western Europe, basically. There are some shifts around, but it's even if you go if you're sort of set in other parts of the world, it's still this kind of medieval world, when that was how the world operated. So actually, the best you could hope for is a good king, an enlightened king. You couldn't hope for democracy. Democracy wasn't really achievable at the time because people couldn't read or write. There wasn't a way of operating a democracy. So it's it's a fantastic question, but I think that this all boils down to, because this is how the genre has developed. The issue is whether or not the people use the setting as being, this is a good thing rather than just an observation. My take is that, say, George R.R. Martin is very clear. He has monarchies in his world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's pro-monarchy. You do not leave reading A Song of Ice and Fire thinking, yeah, if only we had monarchies ruling the world today in the way that they did on the Iron Throne. The Iron Throne, that's a great idea. That's not what you leave A Song of Ice and Fire with. That you don't get that kind of feeling. So I would say the only tweak I would say to that is that just because lots of fantasy stories include monarchies or are based in worlds with monarchies does not mean that they are putting forward the idea that monarchies are good in and of themselves. Okay, let's go to Lady Pushkin saying, hello Robert, hope you and Dan are keeping cool ish. Do you think peace is achievable? This is a very hard question to answer. Is it achievable in the short term? Yes. In terms of a cessation of war, definitely. This is within the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. The cessation of war, yes. Will we see it in this story just in Westeros? No. We will end, the story will end, I'm pretty confident, not too much after the ending of all of the action. So we will get tying up the loose ends after it all, but we're not going to have, and the 20 years later, the long detailed discussion about how they set things up afterwards, how they kept the peace, things like that. So we're not going to see that, but we will see a continent which has been ravaged by war and is on its knees and is therefore happy for a time of peace, and that will be the feel, I suspect, as we leave the books, we leave the story. But I wouldn't put it past George R. R. Martin to include just this hint of a feeling that this could all just happen again. The human spirit has not changed. The lust for power has not changed. We're not, I mean, I've not made this point for a long time, but I think I made it out a few times before season 8 of Game of Thrones, but I think it's worth repeating for the books. We are not going to have a system where all of an end of this story where all of the bad guys die and all of the good guys survive. That is not how it's going to be. Some of the people we might consider to be bad guys will survive, or slightly morally grey people will survive. Some of the good characters will die. That is all wrapped up in this kind of bittersweet ending that George R. R. Martin has got for us. So is peace possible? I think Westeros will fight itself to a standstill, but I think George R. R. Martin will leave us with the idea that you need more structural change before you can say that you're going to get a lasting peace. Pardon me. Question from Cloaked One. Again, thank you very much. Picking up for Mistman Jones, saying, why are armies in Westeros so small scale compared to the legions of Rome? They have the population to raise bigger armies, but instead we hear of hundreds, not thousands. We do have armies of thousands, but not quite the size yet, as you say, of the legions of Rome. This is because of, I think, if we're trying to work real world, as George R. R. Martin tends to, the way that the Roman Empire, it established legions with a view to them going out to conquer certain places. Yes, some of them stayed at home, but they would send legions out to places. That isn't, and they were professional armies, effectively. That is not how the system of Westeros works. You get effectively conscription. When the banners are called in the north, for example, you get the call goes out to the big houses, and then they put out the call to any kind of smaller houses that are vassal to them, and they say to the people in the area, okay, the menfolk who are of fighting age, come here, we're gathering together. They take their pitchforks and head up, and they all head into Winterfell. Then they start equipping them properly, and then they march. So there are some people who are the knights equivalent. In the north, I don't have so many knights, but there are some who are professional fighters. But the mass of armies that come from the regions are not. They are effectively conscripted soldiers. That doesn't mean they're going to fight poorly all the time, but they're not the same. So there are at least two standing city watches, one being in King's Landing, another one being in Lannisport, and my mind says that there might be a third somewhere, maybe Gulltown, but generally speaking, they do not have standing armies in the way that lots of places in Essos do. Lots of places in Essos have standing armies or hire sellsword companies, partly because of the threat of the Dothraki. They could at any moment be attacked by a Dothraki horde, and that is not the situation that you have in Westeros. So they're slightly different. The armies there, we do get big armies in Westeros, but they're not professional armies. Googly Woogly, hi there, saying just a quick hello and thank you for these extremely entertaining discussions. Love this community. This is a fantastic community, I agree, and fantastic to see you. Chaos Ballerina, happy name day again. Picking up for Nat Westwood, thank you so much for doing that. Dear Foreign Robert, what was the first war that the Maesters are believed to have manipulated? I don't know about wars that they have manipulated. I mean, I'm kind of scratching my head on this one. The Maesters tend not to want wars, so they're tending not to manipulate wars per se. What they do is have an impact down in Old Town, and so for example, when there was the Faith of the Seven uprising there, way back at the very end of Maegor's reign, beginning of Jaehaerys's, I believe that the Maesters influenced that war, because it was effectively a war. It was a siege by getting the Septon Moon assassinated. That's my personal take. I think that they also had a role in the Doom of Valyria. So what they tend to do is more focused work to get the ends that they want, rather than trying to push things into war, because once you push things into war, then that's a lot harder to manage what's going on. Question from username redacted, saying, why has military technology seemed to be stagnant for thousands of years in A Song of Ice and Fire? They've been using basically the same weapons for centuries. They have. Excuse me while I just pour myself another drink. So the fact that technology has not advanced is striking. There are a few answers to this. One is that it didn't advance huge amounts in our world. Yes, there were advances in technology, but hundreds of years went by, and this is a fantasy with the same technology, and this is a fantasy world, so things are multiplied out. Hundreds of years become thousands of years. George R. R. Martin tends to write things bigger, better, faster, more as part of his fantasy world. But there is a deeper issue about the structure of the world and where technological advancement comes from. Where does technological advancement come from? It comes from research and it comes from innovation. So where does research and innovation come? The only place that is allowed is in Old Town with the Maesters. They have kept a tight control on this, and they are not wishing to get other people to allow other people to have the ability to do this. So they are to get the training that they need in order to learn how to do stuff. So it's the Maesters who have been keeping their own power by preventing other people from learning. This is, I think, at least partly George R. R. Martin's take on the way that the monasteries of Western Europe, they trained their people to read and write, but they were not wanting to train the general populace. They didn't run schools for the local children to be learning how to read and write. They were happy to keep the knowledge themselves. It's only with the invention of things like the printing press, Gutenberg, and all the rest of it, that's when you get this kind of explosion in technology, because suddenly people can do their own research, they can understand more, and there is greater chance for innovation. So I think it's relatively realistic. You get the free cities do have some bits of technology that Westeros does not, which kind of backs this up, because the Maesters obviously aren't there holding on to technology. You go to Bravos, for example, and you find that they have got their arsenal there, can create a frigate, a battleship, effectively in a day, because they've worked out how to streamlined all the processes to be building something new, which is just this marvel of the world. So there are some signs of, and Mir is another example, when they've got that, they're clearly have got optics, is something that they've been doing a lot of work on. So there are some bits of technological advancement, but generally not in Westeros, and that is almost certainly down to the Maesters. Question from Kelly Johnson. If the Beatles played Hey Jude across the land, would it bring peace to Westeros? Yes, let's just go with yes on that one. Good question. Bettina Nielsen, just to say thank you for all that you do. Thank you. And an extra thank you to the mods. Yes, mods, thank you very much. Doing an excellent job again today. And I think Thomas Ryszkowski saying, why is Westeros stuck in a feudal system and still using swords and other antiquated weapons for thousands of years? Thanks, first live stream. Well, welcome to the live stream. I think I largely answered that one a moment ago. Westeros being stuck in a feudal system is because that I think I answered the technology bit already, but being stuck in a feudal system is because that's where the power is, and you can only break out from your feudal system. Certainly in our sort of world, the breaking out from the feudal system started to come when power seeped out to the people, so it wasn't just concentrated in certain hands. Keeping so, for example, you get advances, and this wasn't a break of the feudal system per se, but it was a break in the power of the king. The Magna Carta was because the barons of England were suddenly more powerful than the king, and they could call the king to account and make him sign something. And so it's a matter of the balance of power. If King John had huge amounts of power and authority at that point, Magna Carta would never have happened. And so you then suddenly get the you see that the power shifts when or structures shift when power shifts, and when the people have the power, the risk is people power, but when the people have the power, that's the point at which the feudal system can start shifting. Sasuke saying Magna Carta was King John, possibly as the worst king. Yeah, he was not a good king, so this was good. Right, question from Lady Savum saying, hi Robert, this stream gives me something to look forward to every Thursday evening while I'm editing my videos for my clients' social media accounts. I feel your pain. Knowing George R. Martin's political background, staunch pacifist, feminist, conscientious objector, etc., do you believe George R. Martin will use A Song of Ice and Fire to show that democracy is the only solution to the medieval power structure that is powered by a war machine for the continued instantiation of the powers that be? Or do you believe it will be more nuanced than that? Is he going to create an idea about government utopia, or is he going to leave the idea of a fantasy world with no matter the the government structure, humans will abuse it anyway, and the wheel of power continues to turn. Okay, interesting questions. We kind of build on what we've been talking about already. So George R. Martin is not. He's very clear. He's not writing an allegory. He's not writing a story to make a point. And I don't think he's going to make a point about democracy either. It's noticeable that when you think about democracy in his world, there are two strong examples of democracy. One of them is the Night's Watch, and the other one is the Iron Islands. Now, the Iron Islanders, we often talk about, Euron, and certainly on the TV show, they tried to make it look like Euron was not the proper ruler. Euron had as strong a democratic mandate as anyone in the Seven Kingdoms ever had. The King's Moot was a calling together of all the captains, or effectively all the sort of the representatives of the people, and they agreed by popular acclamation to make him king. So he had a mandate. And the Night's Watch, yes, they vote on who is going to be in charge. Have they always got it right? Not necessarily. So I don't think George R. R. Martin is trying to show that democracy is better than everything else. I don't think we're going to end up with a democracy. I think that the closest we will probably get is something like a great council. I do wonder whether we might end up with something that is a bit akin to the way the Holy Roman Empire used to do it, which was that the electors, as they were called, who were basically the nobles, the kings of the various city-states around that part of what was once the Western Roman Empire, they all effectively had a vote and decided on who would then be the Holy Roman Empire. That is probably the closest we're going to get, is this kind of great council idea of deciding who the king might be. We're not going to go straight to democracy. I think if any kind of point will be drawn from this is that there are some things which are indeed eternal. War is bad. Lust for power is bad. I don't think, however, he's going to offer solutions. I think he's just going to show us the things which aren't working, rather than say, well, this is how you go from a feudal society to a utopian society. But I don't think that's where we're going to end up. Hermione, interesting point in the chat, saying, in our world, the plague caused a lot of social upheaval, with the survivors demanding more from their lords. Do you think after the War for the Dawn, Westeros will see something similar? It could well do. Whether there's a huge kind of upheaval, social upheaval, I don't know. I think it would be quite interesting to see that. I don't know whether it would be a universal thing. My feeling is that it's going to feel like everybody's just on their knees at the end of this. It's just everybody's just going to be exhausted and broken and just trying to carry on, rather than let's devise a better way of doing things. The difference with the others is, I suspect that there's not a lot. Most people will go, actually, there's not a lot more that the nobles could do to save us, because it is such an astonishing threat coming at you. Whereas with the plague, you could talk about living conditions. I guess the understanding of what caused it was slightly different at the time. But in answer to the straight question, I'm not. He might do, but I can't. I don't think we're going to see a huge amount about what happens after it. Mistman Jones could I answer earlier Brotherhood Without Banners question? Would be greatly appreciated. Not sure if I spotted that one. I have a quick flick through. No, can't see that one immediately. But if you tag me in, and I'll try and get to it. Connor Gormley. Hi, Robert. Hope you're well. This is my first month on Patreon and loving it, which is a perfect way for me to quickly segue into saying thank you, patrons. I always thank you. I always mean it. This is how I keep doing what I do, is through your support. So thank you so much. If you would like to support this channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. There is a link down in the description. I'm sure if you're watching live, then one of the moderators, wherever the chat is, will be dropping a link in there as well. So there are benefits for being a patron. One that you can see here is the patron questions get priority on my live streams, and there are other goodies that I've got over there, including all of the audio that I produce, goes over there as well. So if you're interested, there's a link down in the description. But Connor goes on to say, I was wondering who you thought might join Fagon's side, and if they will turn against him if his true parentage is revealed. Okay, so the Fagon has an army already with the Golden Company, and who will join him? I'm of the opinion that the biggest people to be joining will be Dawn, House Martell. Now, I've gone through this logic a few times, but very broadly speaking, Doran Martell's cunning plan all the time, always and forever, is to try to marry his family to the Targaryens. He's a cunning strategist, apparently, but he only seems to have one plan. Now, if as is the case, he is faced with two options, he will investigate those two options, which is what he's doing. The two options being Dany, who he knows about, and also this person claiming to be Aegon. So he sent one son off this is Quentin. He sent one son off to go and sound out what's happening with Dany. He sent Arianne off to find out what's going on with Fagon. So he has to either try and get on board with both or choose between them. What he will get back from sending off his son to Dany, who he sent there with high hopes, it has to be said. He had a marriage pact that was there, showing that there was a plan to unite the two families, the Martells and the Targaryens. It was with Viserys and Arianne, but proposal to turn that one into Quentin and Dany, and basically a sort of an offer to be on her side when she invades. What will come back is his burned body, Quentin's burned body, with a little note attached from Sir Barristan. Barristan said he's going to send his bones back, so we know this is happening. He will send a little note back and said, right, so Quentin came over, he proposed marriage to Dany, she rejected him, married somebody else, and then he tried to tame a dragon and the dragons burned him. Here's his bones. By the way, Dany's disappeared and we don't know where she is. That is going to turn Doran Martell against the idea of linking up with Dany, particularly if, as is almost certainly going to be the case, Arianne finds Fagon, who is already starting out a very successful so far invasion of Westeros. He is going to throw his weight behind Fagon. So that's there. Then there are a couple of other possibilities of who might join. The first are the Tyrells. Now, why might they join? Because what is about to happen in King's Landing is Cersei's revenge. Kevin Lannister has been killed. very last chapter that we have of the story. And this is by Varys, but he is going to frame the Tyrells. Cersei will obviously fall for it because she does, and she will want to get her revenge on the Tyrells, and she also wants to get her revenge on the High Sparrow. She is going to do something. It probably is going to be blowing up the Great Sept. It might be something slightly different, but something big and dramatic like that. This is going to push the Tyrells away from the Lannisters, and they're going to look around and they're going to suddenly see, here's this fantastic alternative candidate who's already just taken Storm's End. He's got an army. He's on his way. They will go and join. That's the logical step for the Tyrells if Cersei effectively declares war on them, is that they then try and link up with Fagon. Then there's also unknown people. The Golden Company sent out letters to supporters. We do not know who all of these are. The most intriguing is we still have some friends in the Reach. Who might those friends be? Well, we don't know. Obviously, the Tyrells are from the Reach. What about the High Towers? There are various other, the Tarleys, the Redwines. There are quite a few really quite powerful families down there in the Reach. So they will get some more support from the Reach as well, I'm pretty sure. So what you're going to find at the end of this, by the time he takes King's Landing, is the southern part of the Seven Kingdoms is actually all going to be Fagon's. It's all going to be loyal to him. So he will take King's Landing. He's already got Storm's End, and John Connington obviously has got allies still around the Stormlands. Dawn is going to come on side, and probably quite a bit of the Reach as well. So that bottom chunk of Westeros is all going to be Fagon's. The second part of your question, whether they will turn against him if his true parentage is revealed. This is going to be one of those things where it will never be fully revealed, I suspect. Dany will probably show, probably by him being unable to bond with the dragon, that he is not as Targaryen-y as perhaps he says, but the claim will still be there, and it's one of those things that you can't possibly 100% say this is not true, because it could just turn out to be a he said, she said situation. And if people decide actually he would make a very good king, then they will probably stick by him. Let's have a quick flick through. I think I had another question, and I was also looking for that other one. So Kelly Johnson, would John and Dany wedding be a Beatles or a Led Zeppelin affair? Well, if Dany has just arrived in, then maybe it will be Led Zeppelin with the Immigrant Song. Boom. There we go. Don't get me to do that again. Reflective rambling. Thank you so much picking up from Mist Man Jones. I think this is the question you were talking about. Thank you, both of you. Thank you for reflective rambling for picking it up. I think the Brotherhood Without Banners is becoming like the KWB, the Kingswood Brotherhood. Both commoner love noble targets, outlaw lords, Beric or Toyne. They also have repeatedly killed members, and the Brotherhood Without Banners is becoming more bloody. Yeah, I think so. They're both kind of linked in with this Robin Hood and his band of merry men feel. That's very much where the Brotherhood Without Banners was. I'm sure you got the vibe from it, as they're sort of hanging out in their hidden hideout in the forest, and they're trying to help the small folk against the mean overlords. That was very much the Kingswood Brotherhood. They were about the same kind of thing as well. That So the vibe is very clear. The vibe is very echoey, and the difference, I think, so the Brotherhood without banners now has shifted. It has shifted. It's on its third incarnation, effectively. The first was before they were called the Brotherhood without banners. Beric's company sent out by Ned Stark to try and find the mountain. That was the first iteration of them. The second was his band of merry men who were without banners because they weren't supporting any of the people in the war. They were supporting the small folk. And then the third part is once Lady Stoneheart has taken over, and they have become much more focused on vengeance on the Stark's enemies. So that they have shifted. That I think is where the analogy with the Kingswood Brotherhood breaks down a bit, because they haven't got that kind of Starky vengeful thing going on, Lady Stoneheart vengeful thing going on. But good question, thank you. Yeah. So Lady X saying, John comes from the land of the ice and snow. Yes, absolutely. So question from Sylvia Galasso saying, ciao, Robert, ciao. I have a slightly off-topic question on House Targaryen. Was their sigil a three-headed dragon before the conquest, or did they adopt it after the conquest? As always, thank you for the amazing contents. Well, you're welcome. So the idea of sigils is a very Westerosi one. This isn't something that Valyrian families had. This was something that Westerosi houses had, and then in order to become more Westerosi, or more acceptable or understandable to the Westerosi, the Targaryens decided we shall be House Targaryen and we need to have a sigil. And so they made the sigil, which was reflective of Aegon and his two sisters. So that's where that came from. It's entirely possible that this was based on something earlier. We don't have that information, but we are told specifically that this was the creation of it as a sigil happened along with the invasion as a way to have a banner for them. Bo Barnett. Robert, hope you're doing well. Question. I am, thank you. Question. If Robb Stark isn't an idiot and keeps his word, marrying a Frey, what do you think would have happened in the War of the Five Kings? I can't ever see him and Stannis reconciling, but do you think he defeats the Lannisters, sacks King's Landing, etc.? Well, this is a fascinating what if. I mean, what ifs as I said earlier, there's always a temptation to say, well, that's not what happened. But let's say he did marry a Frey. That, I guess, means that the Red Wedding doesn't happen. But in terms of the war, what happens there? Now, I was recently going through Roose Bolton's timeline. This is a different way. If you're ever looking for new ways to go through this material, pick a character and then go through their story rather than trying to go through normal chapter by chapter. So Roose Bolton was in charge of the main bulk of the Northern Force. He was given this actually quite early on by Robb, and he goes down and has a battle with Tywin, and then retreats up to Moat Cailin, and then heads back down and sneaky ways takes Harrenhal. And while he's there, all this time he is with the Freys. And there's this scene where they are in Harrenhal. We see this through Arya's eyes, because she at the time is in Harrenhal. She is at the time pretending to be not a Stark, but called Nan. and she is there being a servant for Roose Bolton, effectively. And she overhears a conversation between him and the Freys and various other people, where they talk about the war and how the war's going. And in that, they come to the conclusion that Robb Stark's not going to win. Once Stannis had effectively been defeated at the Battle of the Blackwater, that threat has gone. The Tyrells are now very much supporting the Lannisters. Their grip on power was very solid, and Robb could carry on winning small battles here and there if he wanted to. But the armies of the north, they're a long way from home. They have to subsist all the way through. Their only hope would be then to go for an attack on King's Landing, which would probably not work because of the strength of the Lannisters and the Tyrells was there. So their conclusion was that Robb Stark probably couldn't win anymore. His only hope had been some kind of alliance with Stannis, and after Stannis's fleet and army had been largely destroyed, and then Stannis obviously heads up north himself, there's not much chance for him. So that, I think, answers... Well, first of all, it's an interesting little insight, because if we were looking for where are the seeds of the Red Wedding coming, this is one of them. This is when Roose Bolton decides, actually, Robb Stark's not going to win. The Lannisters are going to win, and that's a really important mindset shift for him. But sets up him being willing to betray the Starks. But in terms of the what-ifs, I think this takes us to the point where we go, okay, I think that the Freys probably would have been willing to betray the Starks regardless. That we're told, and comes up again when I reread through almost every Cat chapter so far. She remembers House Frey and how they're not to be trusted. And George R. Martin keeps on telling us Walder Frey is not to be trusted. He was setting this up right from the beginning. So I suspect things would probably have ended up quite similar, to be honest with you. I think that the fact that he didn't marry a Frey gave Walder Frey a very good excuse to do it, but let's not pretend that made it anyway socially acceptable. It would have been socially unacceptable for him to betray Robb regardless of what Robb did. He broke every kind of rule of social etiquette, murdering your guests. It didn't actually matter that he was wronged. That was just a convenient excuse. So, question from I think I'm just quickly flicking through the chat. Okay, so let's people wondering what sigils people should have. Love to know what sigils people think that they would have their own house. And Tony Sled saying, debate me, I'm ready. The Freys are great hosts. Well, they seem to have put on a good fare before they locked the doors. Bo Barnett saying, oh no, just answered that one. Diego Godoy, hola, Robert, hola. Which are your top 3 battles in A Song of Ice and Fire, and what battle are you looking forward to the most in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring? Okay, so I sort of struggled with top 3 battles in A Song of Ice and Fire. We don't get many battles described in huge detail, actually, because we're just getting them from one person's perspective. The Battle of the Blackwater, I think, is fantastic. It worked fantastically on screen, but in terms of this being a tactical issue, when somebody's been actively thinking about how do I defend this city and coming up with a plan, and then working through the plan, and then the things changing slightly, it was a really interesting sort of tactical battle to look at. Going back in history, I think there are a couple that I would probably name check. You get the Battle of the Redgrass Field is one that this was the first Blackfire rebellion and has everything you could want. We've got to clearly say what you want in a battle. If you're looking for something interesting to sort of analyze, then it works on a number of levels. As the sort of the tactics, it was really interesting, but also there's lots of bits of individual confrontation that just focus the battle in from being high level and strategic to actually this is about individuals. Bloodraven and his raven's teeth shooting Daemon and killing Daemon Blackfire and both of his sons, and you get his son picking up his sword Blackfire when he dies, and then he gets shot and drops it again, and then Aegor Rivers picks it up. This is really you can imagine it being played out on the big screen, and also the 3000 of Qohor is a wonderful backstory for the Unsullied. For those who don't know it, this goes back to what was called the Century of Blood, which is over after the Valyrian freehold, after the doom of Valyrian, the Valyrian freehold collapses. Suddenly there's this huge power vacuum, and it's called the Century of Blood because for 100 years or so, everyone was just trying to carve out what their new role was in this world. Once the superpower had suddenly disappeared, everyone was trying to carve out their place. The biggest winners, as it were, or the biggest destroyers of others is probably a better way of saying it, was with the Dothraki. But the Dothraki didn't start. The Dothraki seat wasn't as big as it now is. They were not as huge and powerful as they are in the time of the books. It was during this Century of Blood that they just swept across the north and middle part of Essos, destroying cities everywhere that they went. There are literally dozens of cities destroyed by the Dothraki during this time. Dany goes through a few of them. She goes through ruined cities on her travels. And Qohor, which we think of as one of the free cities now, could have been one of those many cities that was destroyed. The Dothraki came there. They were the largest Khalasar of the time, came to attack, and there were 3,000 stood outside the city, 3,000 of the Unsullied who were yet to really make their reputation. They stood their spearman defensive position. The Dothraki charged at them, and they charged at them, and they charged at them, and they charged at them. And each time the Unsullied stood their ground. And eventually the Dothraki had to admit defeat. They could not get past this group of Unsullied. The greatest attacking force in Essos, the Dothraki, could not get past the greatest defensive force in Essos, the Unsullied. And so at the end of it all, the Dothraki horde, one by one, traipsed past these 3,000 Unsullied, each cut off their braid to symbolize that they had been defeated in combat, and threw it down at the feet of the Unsullied, and Qohor survived. That is an epic tale. So I would add that one in. In terms of what I'm looking forward to the most, there are a lot. I've got another question in a bit about the battles coming up, but I think probably the either Euron's massive sea battle, just because I want to see what happens there. It's not just about the battle, it's about the magic and the summoning and all the rest of it. But the other thing is the Battle of Fire, so-called, over in Meereen, because there are so many different moving parts to it. We've seen a little bit of this. We've got Barristan riding out to try and take down the catapults. We've got the various sellsword companies camped out, including Tyrion, the Second Sons, camped out, deciding which side to come in behind. You've got Victarion arriving with his Iron Fleet coming in and choosing which side to take. There's a lot going on. And then the dragons wheeling about overhead is just so much, and we're going to have several chapters describing this one battle. We've already got, from the pre-release chapters, there are 2 Barristan ones and 2 Tyrion ones. We've not even seen the end of the battle yet, so there will be several different points of view, probably a Victarion one as well. Question from Cloaked One. Thank you very much. This is for Thomas de Kirschmecker. Will we see another war for the Stepstones like in Daemon and Corlys's days? We've probably got Aurane Waters there as Pirate King, Salador Cern coming, Fagon's fleet, Victarion. Yes, but not an all-out conquest. So what we had back in the day, and what has happened a couple of times with the Stepstones, and the Stepstones, to clarify, they are hundreds, thousands of islands, all small, some medium-sized, some little more than rocks sticking up out of the water. This makes it incredibly hard or a very good place for pirates to hide out, for example, and a very hard place to conquer all of it, because you can just, you take one lump of rock, move on to the next, and somebody sort of moves around and just sort of sails around you and goes to the place that you've just been. It's really hard to do that. So them, or either all or most of them. You talk about Daemon and Corlys. Yes, they did that. In the War of the Ninepenny Kings, the Ninepenny Kings managed to claim most of the Stepstones. So there is a history of this. Aurane Waters is he's a Valyrian bastard, basically, and he has disappeared with rumors, with his fleet, with rumors that he has gone to the Stepstones and set himself up as king. Will we see another war for the Stepstones? I don't think we're going to see a war for the Stepstones, but we will probably see battles going on there. Fagon's already managed to come across, but we've got Dany's fleet, which will be coming back. When you say Victarion, she will be using Victarion's fleet to come across, and will have to go through the Stepstones in order to get to her presumed landing point, which is Dragonstone. So basically that will mean that anyone who's hiding out there in the Stepstones, either they step to one side or there's a battle. So yes, there will be battles there almost certainly, but it's not going to be a matter of people trying to conquer them. It's a matter of trying to get through. Question from Neve Walsh. Hi, Robert. What do you think will happen to Mira Reed in the books? Will she be part of the war and then peace process by the end of the series? Well, I mean, she's going to hang around with Bran for a little while, definitely. It's slightly harder to see what happens to her after that. Presumably, she's going to get him down to Winterfell. Then is she going to be a conduit to bring Howland Reed, her father, back into the action? I think that's entirely possible. On the TV show, she just sort of like went away, and that was it. That's probably because in the books she does go away, but then if she brought Howland Reed, they didn't really major on Howland Reed on the TV show, so maybe that's what will happen in the books. Is she going to play a role going forward? She is the heir to Greywater Watch, so I think that she probably will stay there after all of this. And if there is a part of the Seven Kingdoms that will survive, then the bit that's protected most by the Children of the Forest and hasn't got a fixed location, Greywater Watch, is probably a good bet. Lawnduck 20. Hi, Robert. Do you think there will be only one big battle against the others, like in the show, or will there be multiple ones? And if there are multiple battles, where do you see these taking place? Kendra Summers asked a similar question, saying, how extensive do you foresee the fight against the others to be? A long, drawn-out trail of destruction leading past the Riverlands, or something more short and sweet, like a quick stab from a Valyrian steel dagger? The whites in the book are described more as slow and clumsy. How do you see this impacting the fight? How will Dragonfire play into battle? Right. So I'll wrap all of this kind of questions about the battles with the others and the whites. Just quickly on the whites, one thing again which leapt out from my reread is that yes, they are slow and clumsy, but they are absolute tanks. On the TV show, you could be forgiven for thinking they're not really much of a threat because they seem to get cut down and that was it. But if you read the attack on Jeor Mormont, the one where Jon saves the day, then you see that the whites, they just keep coming. He chops off a hand, the hand keeps moving and keeps attacking independently of the rest of the body. He hacks at this and it just keeps coming no matter what. These are very, very hard to beat. The one that killed Jeremy Riker got, I think, killed 5 people, which is, and these are all trained people up at the wall, trained Night's Watchmen up at the wall. They aren't just like bumpkins. These are, they may not all be great fighters, but Jeremy Riker was a knight. He was a good fighter at least. These are strong opponents. So that's the first bit of clarification. In terms of how many battles, so I think, yes, probably multiple ones. The question is how many of these we're going to see. If their tactics north of the wall are anything to go by, then they will sweep across the north trying to get all of the different places, which means they'll probably will, as they did on the show, go to the last hearth quite early on, then to Winterfell. As to how far they get, I think there's a chance that they could get stopped at Winterfell. Winterfell certainly seems to have been established as the place to fight the others. But we have got a dream vision from Dany of her on a dragon near the Trident and lots of sort of the army of the dead, and she's using firepower to destroy it. So there's that, and it's entirely possible that the army of the dead could move on down if they are aiming for the Isle of Faces. The Isle of Faces certainly seems to be the nexus of this story. They could well get further than Winterfell. There's no reason why they couldn't split their force. The whole point about if you can raise the dead is that you fight and everyone that you kill then joins your side. So the army of the dead gets bigger the further south it goes. So it could get split into 2 different armies. Just like Rob split his army into 2. So we shouldn't just think that they're all just going to go to Winterfell and then that's it. As for, is it just going to be a Valyrian steel dagger? No, it's not. But the point of that, not defending the showrunners' decisions on this, but I think what they were trying to do was to show that the way to defeat the others was not just by beating them in a battle. That's actually impossible. It is to undo the magic that created them. What they were trying to show, I think, was that the others were, or the White Walkers on the show, were created by dragonglass in the heart in front of the weirwood tree, and they were uncreated by Valyrian steel in the heart in front of the weirwood tree. So that's the kind of the logic. It was not about killing the Night King, it was about undoing the magic. And that, I think, is, as a principle, what we're going to take forward into the books. This is going to be about undoing the magic of the others. Sebastian Holden. Hi, Robert. If you could ask 3 yes or no questions to George R. R. Martin about the series, what would they be? I mean, I don't know. It put me on the spot there. I mean, just things that I would love to know right at this precise moment. I would probably have to go away and think about it and come up with some exact ones. Things like, is Benjen still alive? It's driving me crazy. I've got a video on that coming out at some point soon. Things like with the others. Is there an ultimate objective that they're trying to get to, or something along those lines? So I think, I think I'd have to think about it for some yes/no ones. In terms of, does Starfall have an army? You say, please say googly woogly. Happy to. Does Starfall have an army? So Starfall and most of the houses do not have standing armies. At least we're not told that they do. What they have, and this is the case with most of the noble houses, is that you have the nobles themselves who are trained, and then you have a sort of a guard for the place itself. So, for example, in Winterfell there is a Stark Guard. It is too small to be considered an army, but they are the Stark retainers who are trained to be fighting. Similarly, Starfall will have it. Will be on a smaller scale. Starfall will have the trained guard who are there. They will have their master at arms, and they may well have some knights attached to it as well. That's something that's there. But if they were that's a strong enough force to defend it, and also if the Lord heads off somewhere to go off and be with and defend that Lord, but it's not an invasion level force, simply because that the system does not operate on that level. You as a Lord would then have to be feeding and keeping housing all of these people if you're wanting them. And actually it works better for them if their vassals and the lords lower down the line have their own small groups of people, and you have the right to call upon them when you want, which is how the system works. Question from Sasuke saying, hi Robert, I've been missing the live streams lately and I'm glad I can make it today. I saw you in the chat actually, so hi there. Once again, I'm submitting something about 2 minutes before the deadline. I try and put a deadline about half an hour before I go live, just so I get a chance to sort of cut and paste everything into the order that I want them in. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit about the War of the Ninepenny Kings and how significant it was as far as the important people in the main story who fought in it. Okay, yeah, I'm happy to. So the War of the Ninepenny Kings is a really interesting one. This effectively, it was the 5th Blackfire Rebellion, the last Blackfire Rebellion, and this was the last in the male line of the Blackfires who was involved, who was Maelys. I just had a sudden mind blank. Maelys Blackfire, who was he was the guy who had apparently he had a second head, a smaller second head attached to his shoulders. And the might of House Blackfire was much diminished at this point. He joined together with 8 other nobles, traders, rich people, ambitious types who made a deal. And their deal was that they would all work together, and each of them had something that they wanted to rule. and they would all work together to get all of these things for all of the people in their group. And so they started off and they attacked the disputed lands and then won Tyrosh. And one of the members of that group became the lord or king or whatever they decided to name that person of Tyrosh. Then another got the Stepstones. They won the Stepstones. And then Maelys wanted the Iron Throne. So the next step would have been to go over and attack Westeros. So that was what it was. And they lost. It was basically, to start with, early on, it happened the last couple of years of Aegon V's reign, and his attitude was, well, this isn't really going to come to anything. But then under Jaehaerys II, after they'd taken the Stepstones, the decision was, yeah, actually, this is now starting to get a little bit too close to home. So they gathered the forces from around the Seven Kingdoms, sent them off, fought across the Stepstones and won. Maelys was killed, and the War of the Ninepenny Kings was over. So that's what it was. In terms of the characters, and this is the interesting thing about it, was that was one of many similar kind of small rebellions, not hugely impactful, didn't actually get as far as Westeros. But what was interesting was the amount of friendships and relationships that were established there. There were lots of people who got their first proper battle experience, who forged some reputations. People like the Blackfish, Brynden Tully, Barristan the Bold did heroic things, as he always did. But you get the start of the friendship between Steffon Baratheon, Tywin Lannister, and what the person Aerys Targaryen, who was going to be Aerys II, the Mad King. And their friendship and relationship was really important going forward. It also, incidentally, off the back of this, Tywin had a lot more confidence to go off and put down the rebellion he had in his own backyard. He wasn't at the time the ruling lord of House Lannister, but the Reynes and the Tarbecks were doing their own sort of rebelling against his father, who he thought was just being far too weak about this. So that's the first set of friendship relationships, the Tywin, Aerys, and Steffon one. A second one was one between Hoster Tully and Lord Baelish, Peter Baelish's father, and we don't have the details of exactly what it was. But Lord Baelish did a good deed for Hoster Tully, and in exchange, he got an agreement that his son Peter would be fostered in Riverrun. Now, this is obviously really important, because this is where Littlefinger's origin story is, where he meets Cat, where he has that fight with Brandon Stark. He meets Lysa, of course, as well. So this is where it all starts for him, and it was because his father met Hoster Tully and forged a relationship with him while on campaign for the Battle of the War of the Ninepenny Kings. And then the third important set of friendships came with Jon Arryn alongside Steffon Baratheon and Rickard Stark. They became close, and that led to Jon Arryn agreeing to foster Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. So the War of the Ninepenny Kings was important, more important for the relationships it established, which than it was for the actual war itself. And effectively what it did was put the things in place that were needed for Robert's Rebellion. Robert's Rebellion needed to have that series of the alliance effectively the Northern Alliance between the Riverlands, the Vale, the Stormlands, and the North. That strong alliance was necessary in order to be able to oppose the king. The role of Littlefinger became quite important. Maybe not there, but I think it crucially important in terms of the start of the war. I've done a video on that if you're interested. Also, the relationship, obviously, between Aerys and Tywin was absolutely critical. Who was Tywin going to be supporting in the war was one of the biggest questions. So it set everything into the right place for Robert's Rebellion. Ran Larkin, thank you very much for the super sticker, the cup of tea. I've decided that one is. And Lawn Duck 20 question. When do you think we will finally see the Knights of the Vale in action, and who will lead them into battle? Well, I think we will see them, much like the show, when they go north. Now, with Sansa. So the reason why they're going to go north is that this is all part of Littlefinger's cunning plan to get Sansa to be or to be the Lady of Winterfell. That's basically what it is. He's going to look to the north. He's going to see that the Boltons are faltering. He's going to see that Rickon is dead. He's going to see that Jon is a bastard born. Bran is still nowhere to be seen. Arya is nowhere to be seen, although even so, she's lower down the pecking order than Sansa. So Sansa is the best claimant in his mind, and so he will immediately want to be going up there with the Knights of the Vale. Knights of the Vale who have stayed out of this war all the way through 5 books. From very early on, Catelyn asks her sister Lysa for the support of the Knights of the Vale, and Lysa just says no. So they have been sitting there, and they're completely fresh. Everybody else has been battered down by war, but they're completely fresh. So when they come in, they will be an important force. So that's when they're going to go up there. Now, incidentally, this is Littlefinger's big plan, is that he's got himself to be Lord Protector of the Vale. He also has managed to get himself as being he's the Lord of Harrenhal, but also the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, technically on the grounds that the Lannisters gave it to him, so others might not recognize it, but he has got that as a title. And with Sansa, he thinks he'll be able to control the north. So his sphere of influence is now 3 of the kingdoms in his mind, if it all goes to plan. Who will lead them? Well, I think Littlefinger's going to go up there. I don't think he will lead them in battle. I think that will be one of the Vale Lords, and there are quite a lot of possible candidates. I think it will probably come down to Littlefinger currying favor with someone. We saw it with the Northern Lords, very keen, lots of them jostling for the right to be in charge of leading armies. This is seen as a great opportunity. It's a great honor. And where Littlefinger is at the moment in the Vale is that he, having done all of his nefarious doings to get himself in the position of Lord Protector, there were the Lords Declarant, 7 noble lords from the Vale, who basically came and objected. And what has happened in the last few chapters we've seen in the Vale is him, one by one, picking off these Lords Declarant and buying them off. He's managed to get himself some time. He's got a year. He's going to try and get Harry the Heir involved, bringing one of them on. Another one, we get asked this question every now and then. The The tapestries, Robert Baratheon's tapestries, strangely, Littlefinger asks for them and gets them transported all the way up to the Vale, and then they magically appear in the House Royce. This is him bribing people. They are beautiful tapestries. He is getting people on side. I suspect he will see leadership of the Knights of the Vale as another thing that he can give out to bribe somebody to get them on side. Question from Mara Lee saying, currently in the A Song of Ice and Fire book series, there are several major battles that are either taking place or about to take place. Please remind us of these. And if you heard that, that was Dan shaking himself. Please remind us of these and why they're critical for the story's plot. So you pick out a few of these. We've got the battle in Meereen, Euron's battle, Fagon's battles, and there's also Stannis's war or battle outside Winterfell. So yes, there are. George R. R. Martin often talks about there being two big battles about to happen. And that the fandom have talked about the battles of ice and fire being in Meereen and ice being outside Winterfell, the Crofters' village. They are definitely happening at the beginning of the Winds of Winter. In terms of why they're important, the Meereen one is who is in control of Meereen. Is this going to be Dany, or the people representing Dany, that is, or is it going to be the slavers who are arraying themselves against her? So this is important because assuming that Team Dany wins, that means that Meereen will be there for her when she returns back on Drogon, as she surely will at some point. Then she can then set out with a larger army than she could possibly imagine, because she'll have got herself some sellswords, she'll have got herself some boats, plus she'll probably just got herself some Dothraki. So that's why that one is important, just to establish her base and her army before they head off to Westeros. The Stannis' battle is going to be a bit, I was going to say a bit of a damp squib. It will still be a battle, but this is not the battle for Winterfell. This is Roose Bolton sent out the quarrelling sides, being the Manderleys and the Freys, out of Winterfell to go and attack Stannis. The Manderleys hate the Freys, and they are coming to battle with Stannis, and the Manderleys are almost certainly going to turn on the Freys. This is going to be a victory for Team Stannis, but it does not change the fundamental issue up there. So this is important because it means Stannis doesn't get wiped out, but it doesn't change the fundamental issue, which is Stannis's army are outside Winterfell and they are freezing to death. They're killing their horses already. They're eating the horse meat. People have frozen to death overnight. This is getting bad, and the weather is getting worse. So that battle is important, but it's not going to fundamentally change it. And that's not going to change until Melisandre does her magic, her Shireen magic. So that's the second one. The third one I've talked about quite a lot in the last few live streams. Euron's massive battle off the south of Westeros. This is interesting, not just for the kind of the geopolitical, whether or not he is going to be the preeminent sea power which will in the region, which will allow him to attack and raid wherever he wants, but also he seems to be doing huge amounts of crazy magic. So it'll be amazing to see what comes out from that. And then finally, Fagon's fighting for the Iron Throne. So we hear, one of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, we hear that he's taken Storm's End. Now, we're not told how that happens. My guess is actually that probably wasn't a battle. He probably won it over through negotiations. But him attacking King's Landing, which he surely will do at some point, it's more likely, in my view, that this is going to be Cersei being hounded out as he comes to the city gates, rather than him winning a mighty battle against the Lannisters. This is because there actually aren't many Lannister soldiers in King's Landing at the moment. They're mostly off. Jaime's army was off in the Riverlands, so she can't really defend that easily anyway. If she does do something like blowing up the Great Sept, this is going to put the people against her. We've already got the fact that there's a lot in that last chapter, the one from Kevin Lannister's perspective, right at the very end of Dance with Dragons. That we've got the seeds have been sown for there to be a blockade on King's Landing to prevent food coming in. There's also the potential that she will want to raise taxes. They've had discussions about how to raise the money that's needed for the Iron Bank of Bravos, and there's a discussion whether taxes should be raised. Kevin Lannister argues not. He'll be gone. Pardon me, he will be gone. Cersei is very much immediate. Let's solve the immediate problem, and she will, I'm sure, raise taxes. This is going to place her in a position very close to what we saw with Queen Rhaenyra at the end of the Dance of the Dragons. She will be incredibly unpopular and probably will have to flee the city. So I think we're not facing a battle so much as her having to flee the city and Fagon coming in and taking over. Telkis520 saying, all I know is that Wyman Manderley better stay off the ice. Yeah, he is. He's quite rotund. The ice is probably quite thick. So the place where that battle is going to be held is a Crofters village. There are a couple of lakes nearby. I think at least one lake, and there's an island in the middle of one of them with a weirwood tree on. That is where the battle is likely to take place, and that is where Theon is likely to be taken for his execution, which is not going to go ahead. Question from Mara Lee again, saying House of the Dragon will focus on the Dance of the Dragons and Rhaenyra Targaryen's battle with her half-brother Aegon. Do you think we will see any other major battles, or will House of the Dragon be just about the Dance of the Dragons civil war? So I think that the start, season 1, we probably won't see much by way of warfare at all. I can't remember if I talked about this on a live stream, but one of the more intriguing bits of casting news we got from House of the Dragon is the fact that they have cast young actors to be young Rhaenyra and Alicent. And the fact that they have named these people as casted implies that this isn't just like a short flashback of what happened before. They're actually going to try and tease out whether, how they're going to do it. Maybe it will be a long flashback. Maybe they're going to run two timelines simultaneously, but they're going to try and tease out the start of this disagreement about who should inherit, which is basically what turned into the Civil War, which did start a lot earlier when Alicent Hightower came to court. And so I feel that clearly implies that they're not rushing straight into this. They could have done this, but they're not rushing straight into the Dance of the Dragons. We are going to get at least a season of a lot of the build-up. And even if they do get into the dance, it's worth noting, I did some videos, if you're interested, about the Dance of the Dragons. I've done videos on the opening salvos of it. And it's noticeable at the beginning there aren't many actual battles. There's a lot of toing and froing. There's some attempted negotiation, you back down, no, you back down kinds of things. Then you get there's a really important almost accidental confrontation at Storm's End where you get a dragon fight, but that's not war or a battle, that is a dragon fight. And then even after that, you get assassinations, you get targeted attacks on places rather than huge scale warfare. That will be in later season, and I'm pretty sure we will get there. And the scale with which we see that will probably depend on how much of a success it is. If it is a massive success, then they will have big budgets for it. If it's not a massive success, I suspect they will trim it a little bit to, as they did in the first, noticeably in the first season of Game of Thrones, they completely cut out a battle with the Tyrion, the Battle of the Green Fork that Tyrion gets involved with. We see he sort of gets out from his tent and then gets knocked unconscious. And that was a deliberate thing because they did not have the budget to show any actual fighting. Question from, and I've got 2 more questions from my patrons. So now is a good time to drop some questions into the chat. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi Robert, War and Peace both seem to bring about the worst and best in people according to their personality. For some, war is the thing that breaks them, others helps them grow. An example is Tyrion's reaction to war being mixed. As commander of the defense of King's Landing, he displayed a surprising physical and moral courage. Some people seem to thrive in war and conflict and others wither. How do you see this play out with the main characters?" Yeah, I think this is absolutely true. This is definitely something that George R. R. Martin shows us, and how people react to war is quite instructive of their character. And you said with some major characters, I think what I will do, I'll just cover the Stark children, because I think this is quite an interesting way of approaching this. So how do the Stark children react to war and engage with war? Bran heads off and is actually operating at a much deeper level. Rickon probably would have got absolutely stuck in, but was taken out of it. Arya spends a lot of her time in the Riverlands, sort of dotting in and out of war, making the best use of it, trying to find out how she can get what she wants in it. So she seems most comfortable in it and makes use of it. Sansa, to start with, is very much a victim of war, but slowly starts to bring herself around to the point where she can try and control what is going on there. So that is where, and Robb does what he thinks he ought to do. He kind of grows into it. At the moment, to start with, he's very scared and he's got very little self-confidence, but he really grows into the role as he goes along. And Jon, as a sort of I was going to say as a half sibling, but as somebody brought up alongside them, he is very good at warfare, but he doesn't want it. I don't want it. He wants to be rid of it. So that's how the different Starks characters seem to interact with war. And I think that is a deliberate effort by George R. R. Martin to show us the character of the person. They're confronted with a thing, and this is how they react. And that is instructive of who they are as a person. Because if you think about all of those characters, this tells us about how Arya is as a person, how she reacts to the war, tells us about who Sansa is, how she reacts to war, and so on. Caius Ballerina saying Tolstoy finished War and Peace, but came back to it. What do you think of George R. R. Martin's unfinished work in comparison? Should he finish it and come back later? Well, I mean, I have a confession with War and Peace is that I couldn't finish it. It was well written and I enjoyed it. I got about 700 pages in, put it down, got distracted by something else, and then decided that I could read 2 or 3 other books in the time it took me to finish War and Peace. It is quite a tome. So that's my confession out of the way in terms of War and Peace itself. But in terms of George R. R. Martin, I don't think that he will go back and rewrite anything. He will, yes, obviously age and all the other things allowing, he will write it in his own speed, and he will finish it and get it published when he is happy with it. And I don't think he would then look back at it and go, no, I want to tweak and change that. I think his mind is more on how do I tell the other stories around this to give it greater framing and greater understanding for the audience. So he wants to, ambitious as ever, not just finish A Song of Ice and Fire, but then write 12 Duncan Egg stories. He wants to write Fire and Blood Part 2. He wants us to understand everything about this world. So I think it's not that he's going to write this masterpiece and then look at it, think about it for a bit, and then go back and rewrite a bit. He's got his masterpiece, and then he's going to want, his focus is going to be trying to build the other blocks around the outside of it. Nintendo saying, hey Robert, once the wars are all over and spring has arrived, how do you think Westeros will, for a lack of a better word, rehabilitate all the broken men left in the end? I think fascinating, because I don't think we're going to see. I don't think we're going to have that bit. As I said before, I don't think we're going to see the long-term bit after the end of the action. And in terms of the rehabilitating the broken people, I would love the idea that they have this this team of trauma specialist counselors heading out across the Seven Kingdoms, but that's not going to happen. It's going to be exactly how it always is. People just get on with it and see it how they can in any way that they can. This is going to be a more, everybody has just been battered on all sides by what's been going on. You're going to have not just the invasion of the others, but you're also going to have the invasion of the dragons, and the dragons, they are majestic and wonderful, but they burn things lots. And then you also get Euron doing all of his crazy stuff in the southwest of the continent. This is going to leave a huge, at the end of all of this, just this huge gulf of where there used to be people. The vast majority of the population, a majority of the population may well die. This is going to be horrific. And it's going to be a matter of people just trying to pick up the pieces of what is left. So, yes, I don't think that they're going to be able to rehabilitate. Some people will have got themselves to that point. Now, who that is, your guess is as good as mine. Theon's arc seems to take him up. The show seems to suggest that he might not survive. The Hound seems to be going to a better place, but again, is he going to survive? Arya may well do. I think the emphasis is going to be on the people to rehabilitate themselves. Reflective Rambling, picking up a question, thank you very much, from Mattia Dominique. Which war or battle do you find the most interesting in the history of Planetos? Stakes, catalyst, personal involvement of characters. What most fascinating for me, it's legendary, but it's the Night's King, because there are so many things, and this is a legend, so we can't take the details as exact. But there are so many intriguing points. The first of all, who this person was, who was the Night's Queen, what on earth was going on there, the fact that the Wildlings and the Starks joined forces, the blowing of the Horn of Winter, the raising of the giants from the earth. What happened to the Horn of Winter afterwards? Why is Bran the Breaker called Bran the Breaker? Is it because he broke the Horn of Winter, or is it because he broke the rule of the Night's King? What is it? There are so many imponderable questions going on there. We know that whatever it was seems to have succeeded. The others were pushed back in whatever way, but we don't know any more details. So I find that the most intriguing because it opens up so many possibilities and has a real importance to the story that we've got going forward. If this is the way to destroy the others, to push them back, what is it? What did they actually do? Let's pick up a few questions in the chat. Jamie McKenna, welcome to Patron, by the way, Jamie. Great. I see you joined just recently, so fantastic to have you on board. Saying, I agree with you, Robert. George R. R. Martin won't do the whole 20 years later thing. That utterly ruined the Harry Potter books for me. Talk about killing the magic. I wish I hadn't read that, but yeah, I didn't like it either, I have to say. I mean, I sort of did, in the sense of, it's nice to know. Of course, I'm inquisitive about what's going to happen with the characters in the Song of Ice and Fire afterwards, but I'm happy just having them end their story when they do. I sort of like the way that Tolkien did it, which is that he finished the story, and so we didn't actually see everything that happened, but he gave us the headlines of what happened afterwards. He told us about Sam's children and what he was doing and where he ended up, without giving us a whole long story about it. So I quite like that. Andrew Kay saying, do you think in the Battle of Fire are Selmy and Tyrion going to be making a right mess of it, and Dany swoops in and saves the day, furthering her opting for fire and blood going forward? No, I don't. I don't think she's going to return just yet. So I think what's going to happen is that they will win. Barristan will win with the help of the Second Sons and Victarion. I think that certainly turns the odds very much in their favor. So I think that that's going to be helpful. And I think that, however, is just going to invite on the next attack from the slavers. Volantis are sending a fleet across as well. Karth are sending a fleet across. So this is the weakest opponents to face Meereen, and I think that Dany, the timing doesn't quite work for her to arrive yet. She's still in the Dothraki Sea. She's got to then go to Vaes Dothrak and then come back. So I think that she's still a little way away. So what will probably happen is that Barristan and co win that first battle. They slowly start trying to repair the city, put it in the right way. Tyrion will start to learn a whole load of stuff, and then another attack is going to happen, and that's the point at which Dany will come back. And yes, I think that is when she will start. This is the start of it. The start of her thinking about fire and blood came in her last chapter of Dance with Dragons, and I defy anyone to read that without getting a sense of ominous foreboding about where her character development is going. Quickly flicking through, so see if there's any more questions. Sasuke saying, I was just listening to Radio Westeros's episode about Victarion from this weekend. I think Vicky is going to die quite quickly. Yes. I mean, he will come in and he will help save the day, so he might survive for a little while. But frankly, he's trying to steal Dany's dragons, and Dany will not allow that. So no, he's not going to survive very long. Jackie C, do I think that there will be a grey plague in Westeros? I think in King's Landing. I think there's a very fair chance of that. I think that will sweep through King's Landing before it gets firebombed. Gloria R saying, As you said, George R. R. Martin is a known pacifist. If Bloodraven and or the Children of the Forest win the war against the others, what do you think is the message George R. R. Martin wants the reader to take away from the storyline? I don't think he wants the people to take away messages. That's not the kind of writer he is. But I think that he will want us to see that the battle is not the answer. This is not going to, there is no way, as you say, as a pacifist, he is going to have a story, his epic story that ends up with, and then the biggest army won. That's not going to be the way that this finishes. Reflective Ramblings picking up. Thank you so much. I was just answering that as this pinged up, as you put it in the super chat. Jamie McKinnon is saying, "I defy. The heat makes Robert a bit sassy." Maybe it does. I'll have a little bit more of my water. Rob Linson's saying, "How big do you think Danny's dragons will be at the end of the series? Will they play a large part?" Yes, they will. They will be large enough to be destroying things and be a major factor. So I'm still in two minds as to at which point Euron was included by George R. R. Martin as a significant part of this story. But clearly the original idea about ice and fire, based on the poem, the Robert Frost poem, is that there are two forces, ice and fire, both of which could destroy the world. The dragons are going to feel like an equal threat to the others. That's how big and important and powerful they're going to be. So when they come down to the south and then they start burning things, this is going to feel as big an existential threat to humanity as the others do. Okay, I think Austin Flower saying, "Can we assume that the forces of man will have a little to play in the end game of Ice and Fire?" Well, it will certainly be involving the Children of the Forest in this, and the magic of the Weirwoods. It's instructive that the last hero, we don't hear the end of the last hero story. We just know that he went off to seek the help of the Children of the Forest and then won. So clearly the answer is with the magic of the Children of the Forest. Okay, with that, I think I'm going to start to bring this to a close. Just to announce, though, that next week, at least one, if not two, I think really good things are going to happen. I am finally investing in upgrading my equipment, so hopefully next week you might get a slightly better picture quality coming through, as long as I can get the technology sorted. But even more importantly, next week is my first long asked for and long awaited by some people Lord of the Rings live stream. So I will be doing probably an open Q&A on Lord of the Rings as a whole. Obviously we've got the TV show coming to look forward to, but if there's any questions that you've always been dying to ask about the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, or whatever, then please do bring them. I may even have a special surprise guest on for that one as well. Who knows? So that's going to be next week. As for this week, if you wish to support this channel, then the best way to do that is by clicking a link which will appear here if you're watching back later. And if that's my that's where my Patreon page is, and that's the best way to support this channel. If you want to watch more videos like this, the live streams, then there will be a link to the playlist appearing somewhere around here. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you, moderators. Did an excellent job again today. Take care, and I'll see you again next week.